Welcome to the Fictionary Podcast, the show that helps you turn your words into bestsellers. I'm Shane Miller, Fictionary's Community and Customer Success Manager, and I'm here to help you structure stories readers can't resist. Enjoy the show. Hello Fictionarians, welcome to episode 1 of the Fictionary Podcast. Today's show is all about how to outline a novel, and discovery writers, stay tuned because this simple process will still work for you without stifling your creativity. Before we get to that, I've got a quick update about what's happening at Fictionary this week. As always, it's exciting times at Fictionary HQ. We recently launched the Fictionary Community Founding Members Program to our growing community of writers and editors, and we have had a fantastic response from them. We're so grateful to everyone who joined the community early, which is why we gave them additional benefits like an exclusive quarterly newsletter, a private space to chat with other founding members, discounts on paid Fictionary courses, and the opportunity to beta test future courses before anyone else gets the chance. And there are many, many more benefits to come to our founding members. We've limited the Fictionary Community Founding Members Program to the first 1,000 members of the community. And at the time of recording, we still have a few spots left. So if you want to take advantage, you can join the Fictionary Community for free right now. And I'll leave a link regarding how to do that in the show notes as well. Right, that's it for the update this week. Next up, a quick word from one of our Fictionary community members, and then we'll dive straight into this week's topic. This week's Voices of the Fictionary Community quote comes from Annie R. McEwen, and Annie says, "The lively exchanges among serious writers and Fictionary editors have pushed my craft into new and exciting territory." Thank you so much, Annie, not only for the testimonial, but also for being an integral part of the Fictionary community. Right, with that said, let's get into all things outlining. How do you outline a novel is a question I'm often asked, and to answer it, we're going to use Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn and pretend we're writing it from scratch. Fair warning, there are spoilers ahead. So steps 1 and 2 to getting the perfect outline in a simple fashion is write your working title and blurb. I'm going to assume you've got an idea or a premise for your story already. Once you have that idea, give the story a title and write a blurb, which is the text you'd see on the back cover of a book. And before you start hyperventilating, you're writing this blurb for you and you alone. You don't have to show it to anyone else. It's purely used to keep you focused while you write that first draft. Okay, so let's put our Gillian Flynn hats on and get into it. The title, Gone Girl, shows the story is about a female who's, well, gone. Gone can be interpreted in many different ways in this instance. At first, it looks as though Amy is missing, but really she's gone on a much deeper level. The title and blurb together show the reader who the protagonist is, and that is the function of writing a blurb, having a title. It should hint at the protagonist. Now, Gone Girl's blurb opens with, "Who are you? What have we done to each other?" These are the questions Nick Dunn finds himself asking on the morning of his 5th wedding anniversary when his wife, Amy, suddenly disappears. This shows the reader that Nick is the protagonist, and Amy will also play an important role in the story. So we've got our 2 key players right there at the start of that blurb. You can change the title and the blurb once you've written your story if it no longer fits. The goal now is to have a framework that keeps you focused on the core elements of your story while you write. So once you've done the working title, once you've done the working blurb, step 3 is to choose the protagonist. So you must know whose story you're telling. This is key because your scenes are going to be told from the point of view of your main character usually, which is your protagonist. And the protagonist is the main character who pursues the story goal and has the most to win or lose. As we've already established, Nick is Gone Girl's protagonist. Step 4, this is where we actually start outlining the novel. And before we dive into this, I want to make something really crystal clear. I hinted at it up top, but just so you know, whether you're a discovery writer, which is someone who writes a novel without an outline, or a plotter, someone who writes a full outline before drafting, you can still benefit from having a process in place. But as always, you're the artist and you create your story in a way that must work for you. But a simple outline, and again, heavy emphasis on the word simple here, will help you have control over the story you're telling while still retaining your creative control. As you write more novels, you'll probably find that your process changes, and that is absolutely fine. My process has certainly changed after writing 4 urban fantasy novels. And as I go into my 5th novel, I'm working with a book coach rather than an editor. So the process is definitely going to be different this time. But I digress. Back to your outline and your story arc scenes. Now, the simplest form of the story arc, which is also known as the 3-act structure, is made up of 5 scenes, or plot beats, if you will, which help you design your story in a way that captivates readers. And that's what storytelling is all about. We're trying to captivate our readers' attention. There must be something to this 3-act structure because it's literally been around since Aristotle was hanging out in ancient Greece. So readers are basically used to this structure. It's what they expect to find when they crack the spine of your book. So what are the story arc scenes? Before we outline Gone Girl, as if we're Gillian Flynn, obviously, it's important to have a good idea of what those scenes are. So I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of the 5 story arc scenes. The first one is the inciting incident, and this is the moment in the story that rocks your protagonist's world. It takes them out of that everyday that they're used to and engages them in the central conflict of the story. And this scene usually occurs somewhere in the first 15% of the novel. Some genres place it earlier, like thriller, for example, where you need a quick inciting hook, and other genres place it later if it's less of an action-driven genre, but 15% is the goal. Plot point 1, this is the point the protagonist chooses to leave the everyday world behind, and the crucial thing here is that they can't go back to the way things were before, which is why some people call it the point of no return. This scene usually occurs around the 25% mark of the novel, so about a quarter of the way through, and it marks the end of Act 1. Now, the middle, this is where you raise the stakes and the protagonist shifts from a reactive to a proactive state. Surprising nobody, this scene should occur as close to the 50% mark as possible, which is why it's often called the midpoint as well. Now, plot point 2 is the protagonist's lowest moment. They lose everything, they hit rock bottom, and that happens at around the 75% mark of your novel. That closes out Act 2. So Act 2 is a beast. It runs from plot point 1 to plot point 2. Now we have the climax, which is the last story structure beat. And this is where your protagonist faces the greatest amount of conflict, and they either win or lose to your antagonist. Your finale, this grand battle, if you're in a romance, the huge declaration of love at the airport, which is a little cliche. Your grand finale should start at about the 90% mark of your novel, and it will probably span multiple scenes as well. So you have the climax, then you have the climactic moment where the conflict is finally resolved. The key thing to remember is that these story arc scenes should appear in the right order and at roughly the right place for your story to resonate with readers. And please notice there that I said roughly in the right place. Getting a scene to fall exactly at 25%, exactly at 50% is really hard. Don't stress if it's a couple of percent either way. So don't worry about scene placement too much until you've written that full draft. We can save that for the self-editing process and free up headspace now to actually concentrate on telling the story. Knowing your key scenes before you write will make getting your first draft finish much easier. And if you decide to outline using Fictionary Storyteller, which we highly recommend, then the process will be so much easier. You can add chapters as you outline, you can drag and drop scenes into any order and reorder those in record time. So if your story arc changes, you can always use the drag and drop feature to move things around really quickly and easily. Okay, now you know what those story arc scenes are. Let's imagine again that we're all as talented as Gillian Flynn, if only, right? And outline Gone Girl as she would have done when she was outlining. All we're doing here is building a framework you can use to write your story. You can always change your outline later if it isn't working for you. Let's start with the inciting incident in Gone Girl. Now for this, you might write something like Nick discovers Amy is missing. This works really well as an inciting incident because Nick's world has changed in a dramatic way. Amy's gone missing and he has no idea how to get her back. Next up, it's plot point 1, or the point of no return. Here you might write Nick can't back out of the central conflict for 2 reasons. 1, he needs to know what happens to Amy, and 2, he's implicated as a suspect in her disappearance. So as you can see, the conflict is building and the outline is starting to build based on those 5 key plot points. Now it's time for that messy middle. And I say messy because it's often the hardest part of a novel to write. It takes that 50% of the word count, plot point 1 to plot point 2. It's the entirety of Act 2. By having a structure ahead of time, it will be easier to write the connecting scenes that you need between those plot points. But what about the scene that occurs specifically at the middle or midpoint of Gone Girl? Here you might write, Nick moves from reactionary to proactive. He takes an active role in trying to find Amy when he attends a press conference at which he must take control. We also get one of the best midpoint plot twists probably ever in the thriller genre. Amy's actually alive, she's faked her disappearance, and she's setting Nick up to take the fall. Next, it's time for my absolute favorite story arc scene, plot point 2. Now remember, plot point 2 is a low point for the protagonist. So here you might write something like, Nick is forced to cohabit with Amy again, or she'll frame him for her so-called attempted murder. Can't get much worse than that, right? And that's what the plot point 2 is all about, bringing your protagonist down to their lowest moment. We are almost done, just the climax to go now. Remember, your climax scene needs the highest level of conflict, the greatest tension, and or the most devastating emotional impact to your protagonist specifically. If you were outlining Gone Girl, you'd probably write something like, Nick plans to reveal Amy was behind it all, but he discovers she's pregnant and worries for the safety of his unborn child. Now, protecting that unborn child means that he will never, ever be able to leave Amy. Even after the child's born, Nick worries that she would do something to endanger the child just to get her way. Okay, great. That is a pretty solid outline to start with. If you're a discovery writer and the idea of outlining makes your palms sweat and bring you out in hives, I hope you can see just plotting these 5 key story arc scenes will leave you plenty of room to play in the spaces between and allow you to retain creative control of your project. I promise outlining this way really won't stifle your creativity. I'm what most people would consider a plotter, but I now outline in this way too, so I do have some fun in between those plot points. Remember, discovery writer or plotter, you control the design of your story. Okay, it's time for my favorite part of the show, and this is question of the week. This week's question for you to answer is, what is your favorite plot point to write and why? I can't wait to hear your answers. You can either leave a comment on the YouTube video or join the Fictionary community for free right now. Answer there and join in the discussion with a bunch of awesome writers and editors. The link to join the Fictionary community will be in the show notes. If you want to discover how Fictionary Storyteller helps you with everything from story structure and character arcs to settings and conflict, you can sign up for your free 14-day trial, and the link is in the show notes. Thank you for listening to the Fictionary podcast. If you enjoyed the show, hit subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcatcher. And don't forget to head over to the YouTube channel or join the Fictionary community for free today and answer the question of the week. Happy writing and editing, and we'll chat again next time.